Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are diving deep into a modern paradox that really kind of defines our current reality. We live in this age of unprecedented comfort,
Yeah.
guaranteed gratification, endless digital stimulation, and yet instead of thriving, it feels like so many of us are struggling with anxiety, compulsive overconsumption, just this persistent, dull feeling of emptiness sometimes. Our sources make a really compelling case that this wired, indulgent environment we're in, it's made nearly all of us universally vulnerable. That really is the core tension, isn't it? We've sort of mistaken abundance for actual happiness. So the
Yeah.
mission today is to pull back the curtain on the surprising science of desire. We're going to combine cutting-edge neuroscience, specifically on the reward pathway, with the essential hard-won wisdom that's come out of recovery communities. And this framework, it offers a realistic path, we think, to finding balance in a world that feels, frankly, fundamentally unbalanced. Right. And when we talk about compulsive behavior, whether it's food, shopping, maybe pornography, or even just, habitually refreshing your social feed, we have to start with that universal measurement system for addiction, which is dopamine.
Dopamine is absolutely the key molecule here, but it's often mislabeled. People call it the pleasure molecule. It's not really about pleasure itself, it's the motivation molecule. It drives seeking behavior. And the more dopamine that gets released in the brain's reward pathway, and crucially, the faster it's released, the more addictive that experience becomes. This is why things like, say, the smartphone have been called the modern-day hypodermic needle. It delivers this really potent digital dopamine immediately, 204/7.
Okay. Let's unpack the basic architecture of this system then, because it seems critical to understanding the problem itself. Our sources use a great metaphor. The brain processes pleasure and pain in the exact same place, and they function like two sides of a physical seesaw, like a balance beam.
Precisely. Yeah, that seesaw represents homeostasis, the body's fundamental drive to maintain a constant, stable internal environment. It wants balance. So if the balance tips toward pleasure, maybe from a drug or a surge of sugar or even a big win at a casino, powerful, unconscious, self-regulating mechanisms immediately kick in, their job, to bring that seesaw back to level.
So how does the brain actually fight back against that pleasure surge? Does it, physically compensate somehow?
It does, yeah. Think of that balancing mechanism as little gremlins, maybe, quickly hopping onto the pain side of the seesaw to restore equilibrium. They are the unconscious check and balance system. Now, once the initial pleasure spike phase and the seesaw is level again, those gremlins don't just disappear instantly. They stay there for a bit, briefly tipping the balance over to the side of pain. That after reaction, that craving, that agitation, maybe just dissatisfaction, that's the biological cost of the high.
Ah, okay. And here's where that cost can become really crippling, right? This concept of tolerance and neuroadaptation. Our seesaw analogy suggests that the more we hit that pleasure button, the weaker and shorter the initial pleasure deviation becomes. Why exactly does that happen?
Because the brain learns, it adapts. That mechanism of self-regulation, neuroadaptation, it speeds up and gets more efficient over time. So with repeated exposure, those gremlins we talked about, they actually get bigger, faster, and more numerous. It's like they're anticipating the pleasure spike. They get ready to stamp it down almost before it even registers properly. So you need more and more of whatever it is just to get the same initial lift. But all the while, you're accumulating more and more of those pain gremlins on the other side.
And that leads directly to what researchers call a dopamine deficit state. So, with prolonged, heavy use, the seesaw basically gets stuck, weighted down on the side of pain. The fundamental hedonic set point actually changes. What does that feel like for the person living through it?
Well, it's often defined by anhedonia, which is the inability to feel pleasure from anything, really. Even activities they used to love. They haven't just lost the high from their substance or behavior. They've sort of burned out their baseline capacity for everyday joy. And this isn't just restricted to severe addiction either. Think about that anecdote, the patient who became highly tolerant to romance novels. By the fourth book in a series, the pleasure was way down, significantly diminished. It was replaced mostly by this profound sense of dissatisfaction and just wanting to read more, even though the payoff was less.
Such a powerful illustration, because it shows that any highly rewarding stimulus, even something seemingly benign like reading, can trigger this shift if it's used compulsively, perhaps to escape something else.
Exactly. And we see the really tragic medical manifestation of this in cases like opioid-induced hyperalgesia. You have patients who received long-term, high-dose opioid therapy for chronic pain, but often they found that the medication, which was designed to kill pain, actually made their original pain worse. And sometimes it created new pain syndromes altogether. The brain, in its constant attempt to reach equilibrium, had essentially reset its entire pain sensitivity dial way over to the high side.
Wow. Okay, so overlaying this internal battle then is the external environment, what our sources are calling limbic capitalism.
Yeah.
This seems to be about the staggering increase in the potency, the availability, and the sheer marketing muscle behind addictive stimuli. So we aren't just fighting simple temptations. We're up against pleasure that's been engineered for maximum impact.
Absolutely. Limbic capitalism directly exploits our neurological wiring. It's designed to do that.
Hmm.
Marketers, developers, they use things like A/B testing, algorithmic amplification. They're constantly refining the rewards to ensure maximum dopamine release with minimal friction for the user. And the numbers, when you look at them, are just staggering. Modern cannabis, for example, it's maybe 5 to 10 times more potent than the versions commonly sold back in the 1960s.
Or look at our food supply. It's mentioned we're consuming, what, 78.5 pounds of processed potatoes per person per year in the U.S.? Not just a plain potato, but this processed matrix engineered with the perfect ratio of sugar, salt, fat, designed to completely bypass our natural satiety controls. It's industrialized pleasure.
And this environment, sadly, is directly contributing to the dramatic rise we're seeing in the deaths of despair. Things like drug overdoses, alcohol-related liver disease, suicides, particularly among groups who are struggling with economic marginalization or lack of opportunity. So if this is the new normal, this constant bombardment, then the lessons learned in managing compulsive overconsumption, they become essential wisdom for pretty much all of us.
Okay, so if this environment has kind of made us all players in this high-stakes game,
Right.
what's the instruction manual? Where do we find that balance? How do we stabilize that seesaw?
Well, we look to the framework built by those who've successfully navigated and overcome the most intense compulsive behaviors. Their strategy, developed through hard experience, is really a blueprint for everyone living in this age of indulgence.
Right. Tool number one seems to be the hard reset, abstinence. If the seesaw is stuck firmly on the pain side, weighted down by all those accumulated gremlins, how do we physically force it back?
We basically have to starve the gremlins. The critical insight here from neuroscience is that you often can't just reduce use. You generally need to abstain entirely for a period. Neuroscientist Dr. Nora Volkow did this imaging work showing that dopamine transmission remains persistently low even after 2 weeks of quitting drugs. It takes time. So abstinence for a minimum of 4 weeks, a full month, is often what's required to really begin resetting that reward pathway.
And that gives people the ability to distinguish cause from effect, doesn't it? It's like the story of Delilah, the teenager struggling with chronic anxiety and cannabis use. She believed she was using cannabis to cope with her anxiety, that it was the solution. But after 4 weeks of total abstinence, her anxiety was just gone.
That clarifying moment was huge for her. It revealed that the cannabis was actually the cause of her crippling anxiety. It was only relieving the withdrawal symptoms from the previous dose, not treating some underlying condition. Without that hard reset, she likely never would have been able to see that truth.
Okay, so if the hard reset is step one, step two seems to deal with managing the external world, the temptations. Tool number two, self-binding. This is about creating literal and metacognitive space between desire and consumption. We often think we can rely on willpower, but the sources say willpower is finite.
That's exactly right. Willpower fails. We all know that. Self-binding works because it acknowledges the strength of the compulsion and creates actual physical or external barriers. There's this extreme but really illustrative anecdote about Jacob, who struggled with a specific compulsive behavior. Whenever he relapsed, he would compulsively build and rebuild this apparatus, his masturbation machine. He eventually realized the solution wasn't better internal resolve, it had to be physical self-binding. So he threw the components into the trash, then drove the garbage to a remote dump, making retrieval physically impossible for himself.
He literally removed the opportunity for his future self to fail. And that's why modern tools like, say, the K-Safe, that timed lockbox, or pharmacological binding like naltrexone, which blocks opioid receptors to diminish the reinforcing effects of alcohol.
Yeah.
That's why they can be so effective. They shift the battleground from pure internal effort to external structure.
Exactly. And this external control is really essential for countering what's called the chronological trap of addiction, or delay discounting. Addiction radically shrinks our perception of the future, our temporal horizons. Research actually showed that opioid addicts, when asked about the future, referred to a time frame that was, on average, only 9 days long. Compare that to 4.7 years for healthy controls. Self-binding helps force that temporal horizon to expand again, helping restore longer-term thinking.
Okay, now we move to tool number three. And this one feels really counterintuitive. pressing intentionally on the pain side of the seesaw. We're talking about deliberately seeking out moderate discomfort, a phenomenon called hormesis, apparently, to generate lasting, durable pleasure. Why would subjecting yourself to discomfort be better than just chasing an immediate reward?
Because it works with our biology, not against it, using a different mechanism than direct pleasure seeking. Hormesis is this beneficial effect of moderate, noxious stimuli. The pleasure isn't found in the pain itself, obviously, but in the body's powerful, reflexive, homeostatic response to the pain. When you subject yourself to, say, intense cold or strenuous exercise, the brain's gremlins don't jump to the pain side. They actually jump to the pleasure side to calm your system down, to restore balance.
And the data supporting this is, well, it's pretty shocking, frankly. There was that Charles University study where subjects were briefly immersed in cold water, about 14 degrees Celsius, so pretty cold. It triggered an increase in their plasma dopamine concentrations by a massive 250% and norepinephrine by 530%.
Yeah, and that elevation in mood and energy, it lasts for hours afterward. It's a cleaner high, you could say, self-generated and much more enduring than the fleeting hit from external gratification, because your body is essentially rewarding itself for enduring the discomfort. And this principle applies emotionally too, like in therapies such as exposure therapy.
Right, we see that with the story of David. He was addicted to prescription stimulants and also had crippling anxiety about social interaction. His recovery involved intentionally creating discomfort. He'd write scripts for small talk, force himself to talk to coworkers. He even intentionally spilled coffee at Starbucks once just to force that uncomfortable social engagement. He was building mental calluses, as the source puts it, against his own anxiety.
Exactly. He was trading that temporary self-induced pain for lasting competence and resilience, slowly, methodically changing his hedonic set point until social interaction, which was once a source of terror, became manageable, even okay.
And that brings us to the final tool. Tool number 4, radical honesty. Why is telling the truth, even the painful, embarrassing truth, considered so crucial to recovery and balance?
Because compulsive behavior almost always thrives in isolation. And isolation requires lies, what the source calls the lying habit. Lying is often the easier path in the moment, but it walls you off from genuine connection. Telling the truth, while often painful up front, is the only path to real connection. There's even some neuroscience suggesting that practicing radical honesty might actually strengthen the prefrontal cortex. That's the part of the brain responsible for future planning, impulse control, delayed gratification. It might be similar to how learning a complex new language strengthens certain neural circuits.
So truth-telling isn't just morally right. It might literally be training your brain for better self-control and future orientation. Going back to Jacob, the man with the machine, his ultimate breakthrough apparently came when he confessed to his wife. Not about the main issue initially, but about taking a missing shower curtain ring, this tiny, embarrassing lie he told months before and kept hidden.
That painful confession, perhaps surprisingly, led to this explosion of emotional warmth and intimate connection between them. The vulnerability fostered an adaptive, genuine release of neurochemicals like oxytocin, maybe dopamine too, which contracted so sharply with the isolating, artificial rewards of his past behavior. And that highlights the difference between genuine, hard-won intimacy and what some might call the disclosure porn sometimes seen today. Real honesty is about connection, even when it hurts.
Okay, so this framework, abstinence, binding, pressing the pain side, and honestly, it offers a really robust strategy. But we do have to address the critique of what seems like the default modern strategy, which is often just to medicate the problem away. You mentioned this statistic earlier, more than 1 in 10 Americans takes an antidepressant, for example.
Right. And while psychiatric drugs offer absolutely essential relief for many people suffering from genuine mental illness, let's be very clear about that the sources do raise a profound question. It's both philosophical and practical. If we chemically flatten the full range of human emotion, if we medicate away not just debilitating depression, but also sadness, boredom, discomfort, are we risking becoming other than well, as one author puts it, rather than better than well? Are we losing something important?
It's a trade-off, isn't it? Maybe we gain stability, but perhaps we lose the full symphony, the full spectrum of human experience. There was that story of the patient on antidepressants who, yes, she was relieved of her depression, but she found she couldn't even cry at her own mother's funeral anymore. She realized she'd maybe forfeited her capacity to feel profound grief, and perhaps with it, the capacity for profound joy, too.
That ability to feel pain, to experience the dips on the seesaw, it's a critical feedback loop. It informs us, it motivates change, it fosters connection. If you numb the pain circuits too much, you invariably mute the pleasure circuits as well. They're intertwined.
So wrapping this up, what is the final essential lesson for us trying to navigate this world of engineered desire and easy escape?
I think the final lesson is, well, simple in concept, but very difficult in practice. We have to stop running from pain, from discomfort. We have to be willing to actually sit with it sometimes, trusting that our own built-in homeostatic mechanisms, those gremlins working for us, will eventually do the work of bringing us back to balance, maybe even tipping us toward pleasure. But the rewards of this kind of balance, they aren't immediate. They require patience. They require faith in these small, positive actions accumulating over time.
That brings us back beautifully to that final image, the story of Muhammad. He was a patient in recovery, struggling with intense cravings during a nature hike. And he didn't find relief by escaping into the grand, vast vista of the mountains, the easy beauty. Instead, he found it by achieving what he called perfect stillness and focusing his attention incredibly narrowly, so he could take extremely close-up pictures of tiny beetles on the ground.
Yes. He chose absolute, focused attention over grand, passive consumption. He immersed himself fully in the messy, detailed reality of the life he actually had. He chose to pay deep, granular attention to the immediate world right in front of him.
So, the secret to finding balance, it turns out, might just be finding something right in front of you that's worth paying attention to. And being willing to stop, maybe turn around and face whatever it is you've been trying so hard to escape,